Good evening, science fiction film fans, and thanks for joining us in tonight's episode of Fanaddicts of Film. I am Fanatic 1, my name is Joe. And
Fanatic dos for your most.
And tonight we're going to talk about the brand new Steven Spielberg film, the adaptation of Ernest Cline's 2011 novel, Ready Player One, a highly anticipated movie that's just steeped in pop culture. So let's get into this bad boy.
Steeped and steamed. I don't know what that means, don't ask me.
Got a nice, lovely images of the stacks here from this movie. Just to give you a brief rundown, most of this episode is going to be spoiler-free. Brief kind of synopsis, what you get from the trailer of this film. Dystopian future. Most of the film takes place in these kind of like an impoverished sort of slum area called the Stacks, which is just a series of RVs that are just built on one another, as you can see behind me. Really cool concept. Wouldn't want to live there. Very dangerous.
Why not? Trailer apartments, you know, it's the next,
Well, I just can't think of I can't even imagine all the health code violations that thing's breaking. But I mean, as you can see, this is conceptual artwork behind me, but as you can see, the wealthier people live in the nicer buildings. The movie doesn't really get into the class structure as much.
They're much nicer trailers.
Yeah. In the story, the main character, Wade, who goes by the name of Percival as his avatar, he and everyone else in the world seems to go to this virtual reality simulator called the Oasis that kind of works as a virtual video game as well as a virtual society, and it's a way of escaping the real world set in a dystopian future. I think it's the year 2044. Our hero Wade lives in what they call the Stacks in Columbus, Ohio, which is just a series of RVs that are stacked on one another. As you can see from the conceptual design behind me, it's very close to what I imagine, what it looks like in the movie, which I imagine from the book. It's very cool looking, very future dystopian, but I tell you, I wouldn't want to live there.
But it's named Stacks, so
Stacks.
fat stacks, right? Isn't that what this is all about? That's what the world's all about, is making fat stacks?
Stacks of RVs? It just seems like a lot of health code violations there, but no, it's kind of cool. In this story, everyone sort of escapes from their impoverished reality by going into this global online virtual reality simulator called the Oasis, which kind of acts as a video game as well as it's a society as well, an online society. And basically, within the context of the story, the hero is led on his hero's journey by finding out that the creator of the software, when he passed away, which is just a couple of years before the movie starts, he's basically set out 3 Easter eggs for everybody to try and find, and whoever finds the 3 Easter eggs or the 3 keys will basically get total ownership of the Oasis and will inherit the fortune of the software developer. So in a way, it's a little bit like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory meets the Matrix, which is a direct quote from the book. Sue me.
And they actually had used the Willy Wonka song in the trailer.
Yeah.
And yeah, speaking of Easter eggs, today is Easter.
Yeah. So it's kind of fitting. Kind of fitting that this movie came out right before Easter, and it has a lot to do with Easter eggs. Just no religious connotation there, you know. But if you're nerdy like we are, you know what an Easter egg is. But yeah, what can I say about this film? Another Spielberg classic, as far as I'm concerned. Very different from the novel, and a lot of plot points and a lot of the cultural references. The novel mostly references 80s stuff, and a lot of it. Events happen obviously in completely different orders, but it doesn't matter. Ernest Cline readapted his book to screenplay, I think specifically for Spielberg's sort of storytelling.
I'm a big Spielberg fan, and I think he really changed the game for science fiction. I mean, you can tell the guy really loves technology, loves the idea of where technology's headed, where it's come from, etc. All these things. But I think one of the coolest things, at least that I've noticed, is that he's been able to combine these really cool things with technology in a lot of his storytelling, along with younger teenagers that are in a situation, and just they're in a situation that it's inescapable, in poverty, and that's everything. but being able to, kind of discover their own creativity, or, just being able to immerse themselves in a creative environment, and therefore stimulating their creativity, even though they're in this dire straits, so to speak. So that in itself has been something that's always touched me with these things. Having the young mind, using the young mind too, and more particularly, Spielberg, is he one of the guys who basically, I know obviously he didn't invent this genre, but I mean, it seems to me like he made it popular by doing that, by integrating it with the human heart.
Yeah, I think Steven Spielberg and George Lucas are the guys that sort of took sort of the B-movie sci-fi concepts and made them accessible to family audiences in a big, grandiose, just a really grand and robust way that we hadn't seen before. But I also think that there was a little bit of James Cameron and John Carpenter in this as well, even though those guys don't make specifically family movies for them.
You mentioned Silvestri had like a John Carpenter moment in the music.
Oh yeah. Alan Silvestri, great score by Alan Silvestri. John Williams, who's normally Spielberg's composer for the majority of his films, was unable to score this film because he was scoring The Post, the other Spielberg film that went to select cities last December and then opened nationwide in January. A really good film, but quite different than this. But Alan Silvestri in this score, he's usually Robert Zemeckis, filmmaker Robert Zemeckis' composer, which is a fitting thing because he had scored Bob Zemeckis' Bob, like I know him, Robert Zemeckis'.
Good old Bobby.
How you doing, Bob? Big fan. He scored the Back to the Future trilogy and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which Spielberg also produced. And you might also know him from other Robert Zemeckis films like Romancing the Stone, Death Becomes Her, Castaway, Forrest Gump, Contact, things like that. But there was a few moments when Alan Silvestri's score kind of dipped into that John Carpenter like 80s synthesizer type of score. And a lot of times he would also reference like Back to the Future. He even does a rendition of the original Godzilla theme, which is really exciting. Spoiler on that part, my fault. But it's also the type of film score that's really cinematic and really rooted in the 80s, which is the primary inspiration for this book and this film, which you just don't get a lot of scores like that anymore, except for maybe with the Star Wars and Indiana Jones films. I mean, even the Marvel and DC films, I don't think have this kind of grandiose, whimsical type of cinematic score.
Yeah, I love Silvestri. Of course, Back to the Future was burned in my brain in 1985 when I was 10 years old. I remember specifically like sitting there and actually moments in this film were that way. There's a moment where someone's watching someone play a game, and this entire group of people are like, no, go this, and you're moving yourself to move that. Like I countless times where I took the controller went, or even in a theater. I remember that with Back to the Future, and the music was heavily influenced on that. So seeing that and just literally like wanting to stand up, as a young kid. So that's why I'm sad this movie didn't come out when I was a kid. But anyway. Just one thing that we were talking about before about the rights, about all these cameos of characters that we all know and love and seen in other things. You were pointing out some characters to me, and as I was going along, you would point something out to me and it would be already gone. Oh yeah, I was in camera number 2. You'd tell me or it's over in the corner over there, and then it's gone. So you noticed a lot of things that I didn't, of course, but. But anyway, about all these cameos, about all these characters, with their rights and everything. I know that we kind of skimmed over that just briefly before, but let's just talk about that real quick. So getting these rights, how does he end up obtaining them? Would he have had to have gone to like multiple different studios, or just one studio, or individuals that own these characters?
I can tell you this, it was as far as I know, it was about a 2-year process. I'm sure Spielberg's lawyers meeting or reps meeting with other lawyers and reps from the various companies. I would imagine it would depend on the property and the franchise. I would imagine it would depend on who owns the rights. Is it solely the film distributor or the film company, or is it the producers?
So he had to probably go to several. Then.
I would imagine multiple. I would imagine he had to approach a number of studios to gain the rights for. I mean, even if it was five films from Warner Brothers, there was probably different people he still had to talk to. Because Warner Brothers may own this movie, but they may only have the distribution rights in the U.S. for this movie. And so, yeah, I would imagine it was probably involving a lot of lawyers and a lot of paychecks. And it didn't always work out. Without to give any spoilers on the movie, I'm just going to let you know a couple of things that didn't make in the film. I know Spielberg, they
tried to? That they had tried to get in the movie but weren't able to.
Because as dense as this is with pop culture, in the book, it's mostly 80s references. But this movie is a little bit different in that it's late 70s all the way up to the 2000 teens, kind of the present. I mean, they had to make deals with video game characters because they got like the Halo guys in there and Minecraft or that kind of stuff. So I think some of the stuff that was left out, Spielberg wanted to get, I think, some of the ships from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is his third studio film that he directed, or third theatrical release, I should say. And they just couldn't reach an arrangement with Sony and Columbia, which owns the rights to it, so there was unfortunately not much he could use there. But at the same time, Spielberg also wanted to kind of downplay a lot of the elements from the book. In the book, Spielberg's a much bigger character. His movies are much bigger to the story. And Spielberg kind of backed away from that as he didn't want the film to sort of be a vanity project where he's just referencing, like there's E.T. there and Indiana Jones there and you got Empire of the Sun here because it references stuff from the 80s and whatnot that aren't even science fiction.
Funny that you mentioned that in retrospect now, because of course you wouldn't have to buy you wouldn't have to pay anybody to use those rights. So he's literally having to go out thinking outside the box, because he wouldn't have to pay for those rights, or would he?
Well, the ones that were produced by Amblin Studios, which is his company, which was one of the companies responsible for this film. Probably not. It would have been much easier to negotiate with his own people, but Close Encounters was out before then. Jaws was out before then, so they were, Jaws is from Universal. This is a Warner Brothers production with Amblin. He would have had to make arrangements, which they did for several other Universal properties. But the author, Ernest Cline, kind of thinks that Spielberg, as far as what I've read, that Spielberg didn't really want to do a lot of self-referential stuff because he did that once before in the 1979 film 1941, which where he sends up Jaws at the very beginning, and he also sends up Duel, which is thematically similar to Jaws.
And apparently that got a little bit of didn't get good ratings. I guess.
No, it was a critical disaster. It was the critics savaged it. But it's a really oddball comedy. But yeah, I think he just kind of wanted to avoid that, which in some ways is kind of a shame because Spielberg is a big part of the 80s popular culture. But at the same time, I think they were able to pull it off well.
And just once again, really quickly touching on just the fact that, of course, like I'm a big Spielberg fan. I loved AI and I loved Minority Report.
Yeah.
And of course, him being able to make it into the family action adventure. He's able to combine these technological advances and using our sci-fi addicted brains and seeing amazing things that can happen. VR is now and where it will be and where at least he was able to make these things popular through a family culture, but also just touching on and expressing the experiences through teenagers.
Yeah.
Much like other 80s writer-directors like John Hughes.
Yeah. Yeah, which is funny because there's even a John Hughes reference in that, a couple of John Hughes references. But, without spoiling anything and without going into great detail about the differences between the book and the movie, books are always going to be different than the movies, unless maybe it's a novella or a short story, and even then it can be different. They're two different mediums. I personally never compare the two because what happens in my mind is quite different than what you see on the screen, and they just can't be the same. But I will say this, the book does have a little bit more character development, while the film is a little bit more streamlined. Events are definitely changed in different orders. But I feel like the film is still a triumph in, if not in the deepest of storytelling. It's a hero's journey So it's very much along the lines of, you know, Star Wars, Krull, Back to the Future, just kind of like it you know, kind of thin layered story to get you into great action set pieces and introduce you to characters that you can enjoy and relate to. And I think this movie does it really well. And one of the differences the movie, one of the advantages I think it has over the book is it has a lot more pop culture than the book does. So for me, it was kind of like my mind was exploding with this thing. As Ben mentioned earlier, I'm pointing out, I was trying to be quiet and not bother people, but I couldn't help it. I'm just like, look over, dude, that scene over there, I'd love to tell you all about it, but...
Wait, which one? Where is it? Where?
It's just, look, oh, you missed it. But it's the thing from the thing with the, no, you missed, no, it's just amazing. I've never seen a film pull off this much pop culture references, and yeah.
I would be like, where? Oh, it's off camera.
You missed it.
So yeah, of course, we mentioned, of course, Islands of History, great music there. One thing I just did want to mention that I found interesting, of course, you know, once again, you see most of this film, you're seeing from the inside box, the stacks of these teenagers and everything in their community, but you don't see any of the people with money in their mansions. You basically only see the corporation that's basically trying to take over all of the Oasis.
And just
but you mentioned also earlier that the screenwriter, like
Ernest
Klein, yeah. I mean, apparently, he wrote the book and the.
Ernest Klein, he co-scripted it with he adapted the novel to screenplay, but he kind of co-scripted it with Zach Penn, who was one of the screenwriters on Bryan Singer's Superman Returns and things like this. Ernest Klein himself, he's an author. He's written 2 books, Ready Player One in 2011 and Armada in 2014, which is very similar. I think thematically it's another science fiction that uses pop culture references that is also being shopped around to go into production as a film. But he had also written another screenplay besides this. He wrote the screenplay for the movie Fanboys, which I don't know if you've ever seen. Yeah. It's a really funny movie.
I actually have seen it a long time ago.
Yeah, it's funny.
I liked it, and so what I like about him is that he tends to write about things that I grew up with and know fairly well. So anybody who can do that, I'm on your side, and I'll always try and support you, and look forward to the next book or movie.
And it seems like that's pretty rare, like at least from what information that I have acquired. Not very many people go do both. And so that's actually really kind of cool and kind of a rare thing.
I mean, it does happen every now and then where an author will adapt his, like Stephen King has adapted some of his own screenplays. Truman Capote adapted In Cold Blood for the screenplay of the film. But typically, authors aren't screenwriters and vice versa. So when a book is optioned for a film, usually there's screenwriting. Usually the author is kind of left out of the process for the most part. William Goldman is also another exception because he wrote the Princess Bride book and then he wrote the screenplay as well. So, I mean, it happens, but it is kind of a rarity, like you were saying. It's not something that happens a lot, and it's even rarer if to have a comic book writer adapt their own comic into a screenplay as well. So, but I think as different as this is from the novel, I don't think it's any less enjoyable than the novel. They have their differences, but for me, they're both really good throwbacks to my youth. But like I was saying with the movie, they do keep the pop culture a little bit more modern too.
I was actually, as I was thinking through it as we were watching, and I was thinking, one way to really mess this up and I know I could see this happening in the 90s. There were a lot of sci-fi flicks that came out that just weren't good because there was just a lot of those coming out because
a lot of them about virtual reality too.
Yeah, a lot of people are trying to jump on that type of thing, and I could see someone trying to acquire this property and just doing it like in the 90s, just doing it very very one-dimensional, and I could see them like. One of the most important factors that I noticed with this is that they show a balance of the reality and the virtual reality. There's a balance of there, so you're constantly reminded of these people. Like there's a moment where a bunch of people, kids, adults, whatever, they're running through the street. You see them running through the street with the Google goggles on, and and that's not Google goggles, whatever they're called.
Whatever
The goggles.
they're called.
The ocular something.
Yeah,
There's
I forget what they're
anyway. You running around with that, and but then it shows them in their VR.
Counterpart, their avatars.
It shows them on like a battlefield, and so it's great to see these two things. It's great to see these two things, and one of the big moments are something about reality. We're all centered in reality. Reality is the only thing that's actually real. So type of thing. So, and that's the beauty of it. I thought so. Anyway, that's what made it successful, is keeping the balance there. It was deeply rooted.
Juxtaposing there. And I also really dug the cinematography by Janusz Kaminski, who is Steven Spielberg's longtime cinematographer and collaborator. This is his 18th film that he's done with Spielberg. Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, The Lost World, Jurassic Park, Amistad, Saving Private Ryan, AI, Minority Report, Catch Me If You Can, The Terminal, War of the Worlds, Munich, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls, The Adventures of Tintin, Warhorse, Lincoln, Bridge of Spies, the BFG, and now Ready Player One. And also, just to note too, that Spielberg keeps trying to sort of get away from being the wonderkind, the filmmaker who does all the whimsy. He's been kind of moving into darker, more realistic material, beginning with Color Purple back in '85, Empire of the Sun,
I love
Amistad, Saving Private Ryan, Bridge of Spies, all that kind of stuff. So this was the first science fiction film. Really, it's the first true science fiction film he's done since War of the Worlds in 2005. Technically, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls is a science fiction story because it does involve aliens, interdimensional or otherwise, whereas the other Indiana Jones movies would be more supernatural with, religious ghosts and face melting and stuff. But so it was kind of nice to get him.
I just pictured a bunch of the aliens sitting in church together.
Yeah.
Just just getting into a hymnal.
Yeah. It was nice to see Spielberg back in the sci-fi saddle. It's not the last. It's probably the first true action adventure that he's done too since The Adventures of Tintin back in 2011. Okay. So it's nice to get that. I feel like in the canon of Spielberg's sci-fi and adventure films that this is going to be a classic. And that's the feeling that I got from it is a lot of moments I was watching this thing with a smile on my face, like, wow, this is like golden Spielberg. Even though he's using a lot of modern filming techniques, which he's been systematically sort of, for a long time, he was kind of the last living practitioner of an old Hollywood style, influenced by people like Michael Curtiz and Akira Kurosawa, not Hollywood, but still kind of that old style. He's been kind of moving more into modern filmmaking techniques, but he never seems to lose how to make a shot visually intriguing and extremely interesting. And I like him when he works with Janusz Kaminski because it's kind of like the Coen brothers and Roger Deakins, man. It's just they work so well together, creating a unique vision.
Yeah.
And this film is not shy of like unique, interesting vision.
Yeah,
for sure.
Everything seemed to have been done in an organic way with with all these. I mean, it wasn't nothing felt really shoehorned. It was always extremely a great focus on the story. So.
Yeah, it didn't really feel like there was these characters weren't in there as product placement, even though advertising for a lot of these characters and things like that. But it felt like it was made for fans like us who, whether you read the book or not, but are familiar with these things to see it and go, oh my gosh. And I'm going to name some of the stuff that you saw in the trailer. I mean, there's Freddy, there's Chucky, there's the Iron Giant. The vehicles alone, you've got Kaneda's bike from Akira, you've got the A-Team van, you've got the 1966 Batman Batmobile.
By the way, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I didn't even see that, and then you see it, and the way it's revealed is pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
At least for me it was, because I was like, oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, that made me happy. I mean, Christine from Christine.
That's right, yeah.
The original Gundam from the original Mobile Suit Gundam series. Mad Max's The Last of the V8 Interceptors. We gotta get the gasoline. You want to get out of Barter Town? Talk to me. Sorry, I won't. ever do my terrible Australian again. But no, it's just to see all these vehicles, the Mach 5 from Speed Racer, the Swordfish from Cowboy Bebop, King Kong, like you see in the trailer, you see the outline of him and you're thinking, but that's not really 80s, or 90s. It's more modern, you know, with the current Kong movies, or the Peter Jackson Kong movie from 2005, or even the 1933 movie, which obviously wouldn't be referencing. But here's the interesting thing that I got out of it when you get a good look at this Kong, and this is a minor spoiler, not a plot point spoiler, but just a minor spoiler, because of the level of references they were making. This Kong, it's like the Rick Baker Kong from the 1977 Dino De Laurentiis production of King Kong with Jeff Bridges, Jessica Lange, and Charles Grodin, which also had a 1986 sequel with Linda Hamilton called King Kong Lives, which is absolutely crap, and it's never been released on DVD or Blu-ray because it's terrible, but it'll probably get a Scream Factory release or a Shout Factory release, and I'll probably buy it because I'm addicted. But I think it was the Kong from those two movies, just because they would have been, I mean, really, it wouldn't have been the 2005 Kong, because it just looked like Rick Baker's makeup and everything with the scars and whatnot. But just the level of detail in this thing, a lot of surprising moments. Plus, I gotta shout out to the acting in this film. Some corny one-liners here and there, and some odd placed humor here and there. Some really hilarious moments, but I really enjoyed this cast.
Yeah, I'm a big Olivia Cook fan, so that was really good to see her. We've talked about her briefly on our Limehouse Golem movie review that we did about the Limehouse Golem. She was great in. She's also in, of course, if you had seen Bates Motel, that show recently, I fell in love with her on that show. Just great, fantastic actor. And of course,
Ouija. She's in the first Ouija film. Interesting. Okay. And then the lead actor, Ty Sheridan, you may recognize as Cyclops from X-Men Age of Apocalypse, or X-Men Apocalypse, which I thought was pretty cool because I kept going, where do I know that kid from?
Was it him that was briefly in Future? I mean, it's not Future. Days of Future Past? No, not the. I'm sorry, First Class. Was he in First Class?
No, just X-Men Apocalypse, but he will be in the upcoming X-Men Dark Phoenix. One of the guys who steals the show for me is the English theatrical actor Mark Rylance, and this is his third. He plays Halliday, the guy who created the Oasis, who the whole adventure is based around, inheriting his fortune and control of the Oasis. Mark Rylance, this is his third movie with Spielberg. Spielberg doesn't usually have a repertoire of regular actors the way Tim Burton or David Lynch or Wes Anderson does. But this is the third film that he's used Mark Rylance in. He's in Bridge of Spies. He's the big friendly giant in the BFG. And, of course, Ready Player One. So he's always fun to watch.
And, of course, Ben Mendelsohn. He's one of my favorite actors. If you've ever seen Bloodline on that Netflix series, is amazing. If you haven't seen Bloodline, check it out. I know that of course everybody knows him from Rogue One, but he's actually became one of my favorites from way back. But he's great. He's a great villain in that show too, in Bloodline, and of course Simon Pegg.
Did you know that Ben Mendelsohn is an Aussie?
Yes.
He's an Australian.
Yeah, I did.
And did you also know that he's in the upcoming Shazam movie? The upcoming DC Captain Marvel movie. Who he's going to play, I have no idea. I mean, I could see him as Black Adam, but I don't know. But
I cannot wait for that, by the way, just real quick. I cannot wait for Shazam. I am a big Zach Levi fan. I saw all 7 seasons of Chuck, and oh my gosh, what a great show. And you fall in love with the guy. He's a great person, and his character is, and I'm sure Zach is a good person too. But anyway, I'm psyched for that. But yeah, Ben Mendelsohn, and I did not know that. I didn't even know that he was going to be in Shazam. I'm sure that he will do. I'm sure everybody's going to want him to be a villain. Apparently, people that hear about it. But he'll do great with whatever he does. He's awesome.
But he could also be the Wizard Shazam, who endows Billy Batson with the powers. Because I'm a big Shazam fan, and I gotta say, I don't mind Zachary Levi. I liked Chuck, Heroes Reborn. doesn't look anything like Captain Marvel. I'm just going to say it. Captain Marvel was patterned after Fred McMurray, and there's not a lot of people who look like him, if you even know who that actor is. Double Indemnity, My Three Sons. But anyways, I am looking forward to it because I'm hoping they're going to do a good job with it. But also, you got T.J. Miller in this movie from Deadpool. You know, the stand-up comedian. He's in both of the Deadpool movies.
Yeah, and he's been in. I think he was in like Transformers 2. He was in Transformers like 4 or whatever. I can't remember which one.
Age of Apocalypse
or Age of Ultron.
Age of something.
It was Extinction. I don't know. I gave up on the Bayformers after Revenge of the Fallen. After that, I went, who the hell can keep up with these things? Because I can't even tell who's fighting. Because
of course, most action movies he does show up as just being your comic relief. But when Simon Pegg shows up, he's so you know that he's at least I figured out that he is an awesome actor tonight, because when he showed up, I wasn't sure if it was him, because he was this American, very different, completely different. And I actually there was a few moments where I was like, is that Simon Pegg? I thought to myself, is there some motion capture, or is there some serious Photoshop? Because I cannot tell. He looked different. He looked and acted very different from his usual self.
Well, and this isn't the first time he's used an American accent. He's been in Band of Brothers in a small role way back in the early 2000s on HBO. And then he used an American accent in a film called The Big Empty with the guy, one of the Friends, like Chandler. I don't really watch Friends. Not Chandler.
I don't watch it.
Yeah. Anyways, I've actually had the pleasure of meeting Simon Pegg once before, and I'm looking for the image now, and I've got it right here. And he's like, I wish we were homeboys. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see. It doesn't show up so well, but believe me, those two blurry images, it's me and Simon Pegg. And I was really surprised because honestly, the poster art, which I do love the poster art, we'll show that image later. It has a nice throwback to the old Drew Struzan 80s style artwork that, films like Star Wars Special Edition trilogy or Back to the Future trilogy, things like that. It looked like the other English actor, Michael Sheen, on the cover. I couldn't tell that it was Simon Pegg at first. I was oh, Michael Sheen.
It did look different.
Okay, so I'm not a crazy person.
No.
He was.
Well,
he did. Well, we'll talk about that later. No, he did. He did look very different. So.
And I thought it was he did a really good job. He's not in the movie a whole lot, not to total spoil it, because it's mostly focused on the young people. But a lot of really cool, interesting actors, like the kid. How do you pronounce it? Win Murasaki, who a Japanese actor. His character.
11-year-old kid.
No, he wasn't the 11-year-old.
Oh,
he was Daito, so he's more like the samurai. One of the things that I will mention that was different from the book to the movie. In the book, the Japanese character Ultraman, who's a Super Sentai character, very prominent in the book. They couldn't get the rights to use him in the movie, so they substituted him with the Iron Giant, which I'm not complaining about because I absolutely love Brad Bird's The Iron Giant. It's a brilliant film. But the irony is that the kid who plays Daito, Win Murasaki, he also played Kamen Rider in a 2009 series in Japan. Kamen Rider is a Super Sentai character, so it's kind of like they can't get the character. Let's get an actor who played it. I mean, I'm sure he just auditioned and did a good job, and that's how they got him. But I really think the cast in this was really good.
Yeah, fantastic stuff.
So look,
oh hey, sorry, I was just. Anyways, thank you for joining us in the Fanaddicts of Film. Like and subscribe.